It's a very wonderful and perfect afternoon here on a Wednesday like this, and I would like to welcome you on Sports Life here, CBC Television, and we've got a lot that has been packed for you in terms of the world of sports is concerned. And as usual, on Wednesdays or most of the Wednesdays, I have my very good friend Dino. Dino, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lance, and it's good to be here again, after a couple of weeks
Yeah.
missing on the scene. But all the same, I think, it's nice to be here, and good afternoon to our viewers out there.
Well, okay, Dino, this whole week we had dedicated it in terms of talking football,
Sure.
concerning the World Cup qualifiers in terms of African teams, and yesterday we had matches that were being played in terms of as far as the qualifiers are concerned, and we saw big teams or small teams, of course, managing to participate in those matches and be able to proceed to the next round of the World Cup qualifiers. And we saw a lot of action around the world in terms of this other football. But before we get much into that, just in the background, we were talking about handball, and you wanted to give us you wanted to give us a little information about it. Can you tell us what has been happening or what was happening in terms of handball?
Oh, sure, I like it that way. Normally, when you give that kind of space, for these minor sports, as inverted commas as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and I feel like it's never better than getting to know what is happening in the other world of sport in terms of the minor sports, and more especially if you talk of development of these are sports disciplines actually, and as I normally say, like, you need to give much attention to these other growing sports as well, so they don't die. So I took an opportunity as usual, and you actually you owe me, because I did actually mention that we should be able to go together this time around at OIDC, but then maybe you must have been held up actually, and I know you're a very busy guy actually.
Yeah,
but all the same, I think I had an opportunity actually to go to OIDC, but this time around we were not at OIDC. We were taken to Chamba Valley actually, where there was a tournament. It's more like a league actually in the handball,
Okay.
fraternity. Yeah. So actually, I was privileged actually to go and watch my first game actually in handball.
Wow.
And for any information, handball is a cousin to football, because for football you use the foot, but then for handball, of course,
You
they
only
use the hands. Yes. So
but they've got the same rules.
there is
same
actually,
everything.
I could say 90% of the rules in football are just the same, like in handball, except that you just need to use your hands, and the
Wow, so it means for since in football when the ball hits your hand, it's a handball
Yeah,
that
but-
penalized. So in
equally,
handball when it hits your leg,
you are penalized. Yeah, so
Wow.
yeah, just some sort of similarity. So we went to Chamba Valley actually, where we did witness a mouth-watering kind of encounter in terms of handball. Actually, Lusaka Tigers were playing against North Mid actually, so it was a tight kind of encounter, and we did see the two teams actually, pitting against each other, with splendid performance, of course, and it was actually a very good, game, I should say. Actually, we started actually watching the first game, which was actually for the under 14,
Okay.
and in which Lusaka Tigers did triumph against North Mid by 40, I think 43, scores to 6 somewhere there, and then
Okay.
in the second game actually we had the senior team, okay, that's Lusaka Tigers taking on North Mid actually, of which Lusaka Tigers again triumphed by 53-6. So it was a very good kind of game, and we did enjoy ourselves, and the fact that they are actually topping the league. I'm talking about Lusaka Tigers, are standing on 18 points after the first round of games actually, which is about 7 games so far. They've played about 6 games, and they've won all their 6 matches. So they'll be going actually to the next round, which will be another 7 games, because actually this is an 8 super competition league. For instance, there are only 8 teams in the league, so they will have to play 7 games in the first league, and then another 7 games in the next phase of the league. So that entails that they need to play about 14 games or because there are only 8 teams in the league. So far, the Lusaka Tigers are doing very, very well, and I could see that even the time when I was watching the game, wow, there were quality, players inside, the team, actually, great players like Felix Kambundu, who did impress actually the crowd, which was actually, watching the same game. Well, it was quite a very good kind of, event.
Well, okay. My main interest, or maybe somebody who is out there watching, might want to know how do they dribble using the hands.
Well, it's actually, it's like when you want to dribble, for instance, if you are given the ball, you need to bounce it once, and you can bounce it as much as you want. But then if you hold it, you need to make sure that you make a move, so you can understand. The little bit similarity, similar to basketball. Yeah, you just have to bounce it. You can bounce it, and then you dribble like the way you do it in basketball.
Yeah.
But once you like lift it, you need to make sure that you pass it. You pass.
Okay.
Yeah,
there's
you
nothing.
throw it.
There's nothing like damming you.
You can
as if you
can dam it. Yeah, once you're holding on the ball, you can dam it. You can dam using that kind of a movement, as long as you have got hold of the ball.
Well, okay. Coming to another fact, this same tournament, is it something that is nationwide, or maybe it's just local? It's only Lusaka based.
Yeah, apparently I think they just concentrated on Lusaka province mostly, and actually this is where the league is trying to like image, and most even the players who are being infused into the national team are coming from a local Lusaka teams, actually, because for your own information, there will be a trade tournament actually which is coming in December on the 9th to about 13 somewhere, which is going to involve Zambia, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. So most of the players, like, they are coming from within Lusaka teams like Kamwala, there's Missis, there's Eagles, Green Eagles, and then Lusaka Tigers themselves, and Lilanda as well, and then Matera as well. So you've got all these quality teams just around Lusaka who are able to produce players actually to that level of the national team, and I'm sure they can be able to be impressive in that regard. And on top of that, I hear that the Handball Association have got some money through International Handball Association, which they've given them so that they can build some very good pitches, I should say, just around the country, so that they can try to bring up the sport actually to that level.
Well, okay. I think so far since I started hearing of handball, I've only been seeing women in action, or maybe let me say I've only been seeing ladies in action in terms of this handball. Only females were involved, but this time around in the tournament that you went to, was it balanced, as in both there was there was a female competition and a male competition, or maybe it was only concerned in terms of the males?
No, actually, this is a gender-sensitive kind of competition, and actually there are also female teams in this particular instance. But I think on this particular day, like the day when I went there, there was supposed to be a game between Matero and Lilanda, versus Lusaka Tigers girls. But unfortunately, Lilanda could not travel to the same tournament, so they could not play. So I think very, very soon we'll be able to see many teams like on the ladies' part, participating and taking part in this sport, so that they can be able to grow it.
Well, okay, thank you very much, Dino, for that information, which concerns a minor sport, like we call it.
You watch it out. I'm sure Mr. Wadiabanda, the president of Handball Association, wouldn't love to hear that way, the minor sport, because he always says that's a big sport.
Wow. Okay, I'll call it a big sport, but I'll make it up to you.
Sure.
I'll surely make a day that we can go together and get those pictures, so that the people who are watching out there can get a glimpse of what we talk about.
I can just wait.
Sure. Anyway, let's come back to football, of course, concerning the qualifiers for the World Cup. In the first leg, we saw Cape Verde, in fact Kenya taking on Cape Verde at their home turf, and we saw Kenya, of course, winning that game by 1-0. And then when we saw a return match between Cape Verde and Kenya, we saw Cape Verde coming back into the game and winning this game by 2-0, and we saw the likes of Mendes, Platini doing their best for Cape Verde. Anything that you could say for the Kenyans, looking at the fact that in the first leg they had seemed to be the favorites, looking at the way that they played, they were the best. They came out top of the game, but this time around it was a twist of thing. We saw Cape Verde doing everything, having most possession, most shots on goal, most attempts, most passes. In fact, everything was above par in terms of Cape Verde. Anything for the Kenyans?
I think very, very unfortunate. I think for the Kenyans, the Harambee Stars, I think I saw it coming because you see, Cape Verde at this point in time, I think they've established themselves as one of the great, teams in African football. For instance, you've seen how they've been doing in terms of African participation at Africa Cup of Nations, and even equally in the World Cup. Last time, I think they just missed it by a whisker. The time that when they were trying to qualify for the 2014, World Cup in Brazil.
Yes.
If they had used an eligible player, that's the result. That's the reason why they couldn't make it to to Brazil. But then, if you come up to the 2018, they made sure that they maintained the same team as you have mentioned. The players in that team, the Mendes, Platin, and these other guys as well. These are the guys who have happened to do a lot as far as the Cape Verde team is concerned.
Yes.
And for Kenya themselves, scoring I think one goal at home against such kind of a fancy, high fancied, side, I was a little bit worried. Although, a lot of, analysts, for instance, the Kenyan analysts and these other sports, personalities in Kenya, they were giving themselves that kudo to say they've beaten, Cape Verde by that margin. But I was also very much sure that definitely when they get back to Cape Verde, they are going to be able to upset those, tables in terms of how the fixture is going to move on. And I saw it coming that definitely they're going to be beaten, away.
Well, okay. Away from the Cape Verde in Kenya match, we go to Tunisia versus Mauritania, where we saw Tunisia, of course, carrying the day yesterday when they won the game 2-1, and we saw them again dominating most of the game, and we saw Mauritius almost giving up, almost giving up in the second half, although they had tried their best, but it looked like they had given up hope. And looking at the first result that they got in the first leg, they had to give up and say like, wow, we can't beat this team, or we can't go any further. And then Tunisia, of course, after this win, they managed to book their place, themselves a place
Into
to
the group stages.
Yes, to the third round of the World Cup qualifiers. Do we see Tunisia doing it again, going into the World Cup?
Yeah, definitely. I think the chance is there, depending on how the draws are going to be conducted. Because I feel like Tunisia as well is one of the great sides in Africa, and they won the Africa Cup before. They've been to the World Cup, I think, 3 or 4 times, and that really, tells you how credible the team is actually, and they've been well managed as far as their football back home is concerned. And if you look at most of the teams, like in the Champions League, like African Champions League, talk of CAF, Champions League in Africa, most of the teams actually come from that region. You're talking of Tunisia, so you can tell that their quality side, they've got great players, and very few players, for instance, play outside like Fogori and these other guys. But then most of the times, these guys are home based, and that's the reason why they've happened to make up a very good, they've assembled a very, quality side that which you can be able to, to live to the test of time. So coming up against sides like Mauritania, who are slowly coming up in as far as African football is concerned, but minnows actually in that regard, if you can be able to compare them with, Tunisia. Tunisia is a very big side if you talk of African football. So going into the group stage, depending on how they're going to be pitted, in those groupings, definitely they stand a very big chance of going to Russia 2018.
Well, okay. Away from that game, we take a look at the game of the week. I would like to call it that as the game of the week. Yeah. The game
because
of
the week. The scoring.
Yes, because of because of the score sheet. In the first leg, of course, we saw them drawing. That is Algeria and Tanzania. Tanzania was at home in the first leg, and they drew with Algeria 2-0. And then in the return leg, when Algeria was at home, we saw them, I don't know if I can say thrashing or bashing Tanzania.
Massacred.
Hanged.
Yeah.
Yes, we saw them beating Tanzania 7-0. And most of the goals came in the first half. And we saw Tanzania, of course, being hopeless after having that hope in the first round. We've managed to draw with such a high quality team. When we go to their home ground, we'll also do the same and be able to qualify. But it was a twist of what they were thinking. We had 7 goals in the score sheet, and by that Algeria managed to book their place again in the next round by aggregate 9-2. Have we ever seen such such a score sheet in terms of the World Cup qualifiers for the African teams?
Yeah, I think we've seen that before, even in the previous World Cup, qualifiers actually in 2014, towards the 2014 Brazil, we had seen that equally Algeria did dominate actually in terms of their scoring progress, and they were beating teams like, no man's business. So
okay,
even,
so it looks like it's just in them.
It's just in them, and you see, if you can be able to beat them against a team like, in Tanzania,
yes.
definitely, despite all the challenges maybe they've been facing as the Arab region in terms of the wars and all these kind of conflicts, but they still insist that they're one of the superpowers in African football in terms of the region itself. We have just been talking about Tunisia, and there they are as well, Algeria. Thumping the authority and telling the whole world that despite all these challenges and problems they're having even in the association itself, and the players, for instance, that kind of issues with the coaches, but they can still be able to play the game of football, and by showing it that they can be able to, not just by playing but even scoring very big margins. And actually it's visibly seen in that particular game, because Tanzania, when they drew at home, actually they thought that definitely scoring 2 against Algeria, then probably they can go away and maybe force a new draw, or maybe a 1-1 draw, so that they can be able to go aggregate to the next round. But unfortunately it could not work out, and mostly when most of these teams like in East Africa and Southern Africa do play their last games, for instance, in that region of non-Africa, there's a lot of issues, hostilities, in inverted commas, and that fear mostly, when you're playing under that capacity crowd, because most of the the time when they're playing their games, the stadiums are full to capacity, so there's that shivering mostly by players that they cannot be able to live up to the standard of the game. So hence Tanzania were hit by that kind of bomb, I should say. And I know Tanzania, they've got quality players, mostly like playing for TP Mazembe. They've got Samata, who plays with Sinkala and also Chongo, but he did not live up to the expectation of the game, because that was a huge game as far as Tanzanian football is concerned. So I just wish them all the best. Maybe next time they can be able to go for, is it Qatar 2022? But this time I think it's Algeria. It's all Algeria.
Well, okay. Another game that we had was the game between South Africa and Angola. In the first leg, we saw South Africa beating Angola 3-1. They had beat Angola in their home ground 3-1, and then when they returned home, South Africa coming back home, they again managed to record themselves a win by 2-0. Anything that went wrong in the Angolan team? Because we know Angola has been doing quite fine in terms of football, but this time around it seems like I don't know what went wrong. Maybe were they paired with something that was bigger than them?
No, not really, Lance. Because if you can recall, actually, these are the guys I'm talking about, Angola, who have beaten South Africa in the CHAN, qualifiers, and South Africa is no longer in the CHAN, kind of picture because of Angola. So you can tell that these are two sides actually who have been at rivalry for a long period of time. They've been playing each other, but I think most of the times it's South Africa who normally as a winner in that particular instance. So in the first game, I did anticipate, for instance, in the first league, that maybe Angola are going to put up a very good performance. The fact that they'll be playing at home in the first league, and then some 4 days after that they'll go to South Africa.
Yes.
But then unfortunately they lost it technically, because you see, you cannot lose by that margin at home by 3-1, and we expect to go and win any game in Joburg. Wow, that was very, very unfortunately. South Africa, I know they've been having problems mostly like in their first team, even including the professionals, even if they go professionals, but their performance of late hasn't been very much impressive. And actually there are issues with to the player selection, and even the coach himself, Mashaba. Sometimes he picks a squad which is a little bit raw, because he's trying to build a squad, for the future. And many of the times that the players were in that particular squad, which was being managed by that white man, they were flooded, and then he started bringing in some couple of players here and there to make sure that he builds the team, for the future, and he's growing the team. So I expected, for instance, for Angola to take advantage of that by beating South Africa at home, and then they go back for the next fixture just for some sort of a formality. But unfortunately, it never happened that way. And then in South Africa, you saw what happened. They were beaten by 2-0. So on aggregate, 5-1, which is very unfortunately for Angola. And this is a team which had gone to the World Cup, if you remember very well, in 2006 in Germany. But then this time around, they've happened to go down in terms of African football, in terms of the level themselves.
Well, okay. Jumping away from that and from the results, let us take a look at the teams that have managed to qualify to the third round of the World Cup qualifiers, where we see the likes of Zambia managing to go to the next round of the World Cup qualifiers. We see the likes of Cameroon, we see Gabon, South Africa, Algeria, Cape Verde, Nigeria, Ghana, Tunisia. We see Ivory Coast, Morocco, Dr. Congo, Uganda, Senegal, Burkina Faso, and these other teams like we can see on the screen there. And when we're taking a look at this in the background, you were saying this is what do you call it?
A cream of African football, because you have seen actually from the way they've been enlisted that. Most of the teams which have qualified to this stage actually have won the Africa Cup of Nations before, and actually I would say 90% of most of those teams really have, I would say maybe 50% have qualified to the World Cup before. Teams like Cameroon, South Africa, Algeria, Nigeria, Ghana, Tunisia, Ivory Coast, Morocco, DRC Congo a long time ago. I don't know, maybe you know that we've been to the World Cup before. Egypt as well, and so this, that really tells you that I think this is the best that Africa can be able to offer, and I think it's a lesson also to these other teams which these teams who have qualified were pitted against with, to say that they need to make sure that they up their game, so that they can be able to move on actually and be able to qualify the next time that they are going to be given an opportunity. Because normally, if you look at the history of the teams which normally wrestle in terms of getting places to the World Cup, these are the teams which you can be able to see lands on this particular list. Talking of Zambia, Cameroon, Gabon, South Africa, Algeria, Cape Verde, of course they've just come in, but then others, Nigeria, Ghana, Tunisia, Ivory Coast, these are traditional, wrestlers actually in trying to get to the World Cup. And many of the times that these, big guns like I would say Tunisia, Ghana, Nigeria, Algeria, Cameroon, and which was the other one, Egypt and Morocco, have made their way actually to the World Cup. So we expect that. Fine, when the draws will be done, then I think let us find ourselves as a country, because I need to be very patriotic, as a Zambian, to make sure that at least we find ourselves in a better group. I know that Coach George Wanamina did say that it's good that we have qualified, but then the journey has to start now, the work has to start now, because I understand that definitely the drawing of all these teams will be based on actually the FIFA rankings in terms of how these teams stand in African continent. So you'll be pitted maybe against most of the big guns. So you need to make sure that the preparation starts now and everything is put in place. The monies, if there'll be any friendlies, it probably to be played before now and the time when you're going to start the qualifiers. We should be able to start now, because we are going to play 6 games. 3 games are home and then 3 games away. So that needs a lot of planning, concentration by the players, and to make sure that we don't have problems in terms of how we administer these guys, because we need to keep this winning team and probably infusing a little bit of here and there. And then the other part also, we are not supposed, for instance, to change the coach, because that will change the rhythm of the team. So let us keep George Wanamina around and let him finish up the job which has started already, because he has qualified the team actually to that level of the group stage. So let him finish up the job so that we can be able to judge him to say he has failed or not. But then changing a coach at this particular time, that means you are going to disturb everything which is going to be around. So I'm sure we've got the credible players who can be able to take up that responsibility and be able to make sure that we qualify to the World Cup for the very first time. I would say, Rance, it's been about 51 years since our independence, and we have never stepped our foot at the World Cup final. So I don't think that's the right thing, actually. Teams like who have just come, just recently, like South Africa, they've been to the World Cup twice and they've hosted it. Of course, we can't host it, but them, they've got that capacity financially, they did host. But all in all, I could say they've been to the World Cup 3 times. So they've got that experience. But then for us, we were independent since 1964. Why not? I mean, going for the World Cup and be able to step our foot there. So I think all the best to the lads. They've done well. Let us just keep them and make sure that they qualify to the World Cup 2018.
Well, okay. Just quickly, let's take a look at the teams that the World Cup requires from Africa. How many teams will be picked from Africa in terms of the World Cup finals? Now, these are the teams that have reached the Africa Cup, the World Cup. Sorry, how many teams are picked from Africa?
Okay, that's a very good question. Actually, FIFA has happened to offer 5 places for Africa in that particular instance, but then they've been an outcry that we need more places to the World Cup. So in this instance, the teams which have qualified to this stage are 20. So they are going to be grouped into four teams in each group. That makes 5 groups: A, B, C, D, and E. Yeah. So from each group, there's only going to be one team to qualify to the World Cup. So you can imagine
there's
how hard
like
it is.
Even the runner.
No, there's no running up because we only need 5 places actually. So that shows how important this stage is, because we might say that we have qualified fine to this level, but then we need to put an extra effort to make sure that we find ourselves as number 1 on the spot. And I think the secret actually, according to my own observation and analysis, is to be able to win your home games and try to make sure that you pick at least maybe 1 or so win outside away, and then even force some sort of a draw, or even when you lose a game, that would be fine. But then you must make sure that at least when you play away, at least you come back with a point. But the games at home, they should be the must-win games. You should collect 9 points at home and try to win 1 game away. That comes to 12, and then maybe draw 1. That would be fine. I think you'll be safe and dry.
Okay, thank you very much, Dino, for that information, and looking forward, of course, to hosting you again so that you can continue giving us that information.
I am for you, and you are for me, so I'll always be there for you.
We are all for each other.
Definitely.
Well, viewers, there you have it. We've come to the end of today's edition of Sports Life, and as usual, I was with my fellow colleague Dino. We tried as much as possible to talk about the games that have been played throughout the week, and make sure to join us on Saturday again at 16 hours as we get to give you yet another update of what will be happening in the world of sports and football, plus any other sport which I call minor, but Dino says they are not minor sports, so I bet I'll stop calling them.
Stop that.
Well, okay, from me and of course my friend Dino and the entire CBC crew, production crew, it's bye-bye. See you on Saturday.